the world of mobile home parks.
So I have to imagine that there are a lot of perceptions about mobile homes, and maybe some of them are misperceptions. Why mobile homes? That's probably a good question.
For the most part, we don't own the homes. And so, we're not getting calls when their air conditioning breaks or when their toilet, breaks or their plumbing gets backed up or anything like that. If there's a roof leak or anything like that, it's their responsibility.
What kind of returns are we talking?
You're listening to Copeland Morgan Media, your source for investment property analysis, education, and advice. Find us online at copelandmorgan.com.
Welcome back to the Tampa Bay Real Estate Investors Podcast, folks. I'm your host, Jeff Copeland, and with us today is Kevin Bupp. Kevin is a Florida-based real estate investor, iTunes podcast host, a serial entrepreneur. He's done hundreds of millions of dollars worth of real estate transactions. He is also, as you can see behind him, there's some books on the shelf there. He's recently a published author, and we were just talking about that a little bit before we started recording. And I'd love to hear more about that process, Kevin. And Kevin's podcast is called Real Estate Investing for Cashflow. And cashflow tends to be, the common theme throughout your stuff. So I look forward to talking about why that is. But before we dive into Kevin and his background, I do want to put in a quick plug for our sponsor. This episode today is brought to you by Upside Title. They are a new title company in St. Petersburg, Florida, but they are not staffed by new people. I have done hundreds of transactions with Robin Turner, the owner there, and I'm really excited for her to start this new venture. So if you're looking for someone to close a transaction, hold your escrow money, do real estate stuff in terms of a title company, check out UpsideTitle.com. So Kevin, welcome. I was going to say welcome back, but I think last time we did this, I was on your show. So
that's correct.
It feels the same, but it's just going in the opposite direction, I guess. But welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here, my friend.
Yeah, and I should have said in the intro, but one of the things we really want to dive into today, and it's one of your niche markets, is mobile home park investing. And actually it's parks and parking. You've recently kind of pivoted a little bit to parking structures and parking lots for cars. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we love to own and then rent out the land. So it's kind of it's similar business models to a certain extent. In our mobile home parks, we're renting the land or the space to someone that's got a mobile home that they're going to tie down and live in, and in a parking lot or parking garage, we're ultimately renting out either transient or monthly spaces for those that need to park their vehicles.
Anything that will bring in revenue, right?
That's it.
Well, before we dive into all that kind of stuff, let's start with kind of Kevin Bupp 101. You're located up in Clearwater, right? So you're local. We're really in the same market, but we were talking about this as well. A lot of my clients are out of state, and a lot of your partners in investments and parks and parking are outside of Florida as well. So we kind of cross over both. But how did you get into this? How did you, all this stuff come from? Tell them a little bit about you as an investor and what you do.
Yeah, no, great question. And, I got my start, Jeff, back when I was 19 years old. I'm 40 plus years old today. So I've been a full-time investor
you haven't hit 40-10 yet, huh?
Yeah. I've been a full-time investor for over 20 years now. And, I always joke that, I didn't find real estate, but it found me. And so very grateful for, meeting a gentleman by the name of David back when I was 19. David was about 25 years my senior, and he was a local real estate investor up in Pennsylvania, a small town I grew up in, and met him through a girl I was dating. He was dating her mom, right? And so it was a very random occurrence, but David and I became pretty good friends, and ultimately I saw his lifestyle was very different than mine. He wasn't what I perceived to be, back then he was what I perceived to be wealthy, but like looking back, he did very well. He was a big fish in a small pond back in the town I grew up in. And he did things very differently than what, I did growing up in a very middle-class family. We weren't poor, but we didn't have a lot either. We had everything we needed, but he had a lot more flexibility, it seemed, in his life. I remember always seeing him around my girlfriend's mom's house, like, Wednesday afternoon or whatever, in between classes. I'd stop by, and like he would just be randomly there, which my parents were at work, right? They were working 9 to 5 jobs. And so anyway, I was very intrigued by that first and foremost. And ultimately, David invited me to a conference way back then that I went to. I didn't know anything about, but it was more of a wholesale and flip and fix conference out in Philadelphia that I attended with him. And his partner couldn't go. And so he's like, hey, I got a ticket. You want to come? You want to learn about this business that I'm involved in? I'm like, absolutely. I don't know what the hell I'm getting into, but like, would love to learn. And that's where it all started. I went to that conference and got super excited, and met a lot of people that were, again, in my eyes, we're doing massively huge things and making big paychecks, either wholesaling houses or fixing and flipping houses. And I didn't know anything about any of that. But what I did know is that David did. And also a lot of the people I met there, I didn't feel like they were any smarter than I was. They just knew more about that subject than I did. And so long story short, I convinced David to take me underneath his wing, which ended up being a little over a year, about 14 months, where in between tending bar in the evening and going to a local community college, I did whatever he needed to do in his business. I run errands for him. I'd drop off contracts. I'd get leases signed. I would go to Home Depot. I would do whatever he needed. I'd go to get coffee if that's what he needed. Right. And in exchange for that, I got to be around him and listen to him interact with sellers, with buyers, with prospective tenants, with contractors, with realtors, with brokers, what have you, and just listen to what he said and how he said it and why he said it, and ultimately just literally mirrored his exact business, and bought my first property then at the age of 20, and continued to, again, not reinvent the wheel, just literally following his footsteps, which was really built around cash flow. He had a lot of single family and small multifamily rentals, and I did learn very quickly that. After I bought the very first property, I used I had $7,000 saved up, and I used that along with a private lender he introduced me to buy a really rundown property, renovated it, got it rented, and realized that $300 a month of cash flow, it was going to take a very long time for me to save up enough money to buy the next property. Right. And so that was the first realization of, my model has to be shifted slightly than David's. David's been doing it longer. He's obviously built up capital reserves, and he's got many properties. He's refinanced, pulled capital out, and rebought more properties. And so my model initially changed to a, wholesale 2 or 3, keep one. Wholesale 2 or 3, keep one. And by my mid-20s, I had accumulated a fairly large portfolio of single-family homes down here. I moved to Florida back when I was 22, and during my early to mid-20s, had accumulated 122 single-family properties down here and a few hundred apartment units, and that was really that was it. I didn't reinvent the wheel. I did what I saw worked for both David and other investors, and just literally replicated their exact steps along the way. And at some point, I realized that I wanted to stick my toe in the water of commercial real estate. For what, I saw another opportunity of how to make money outside of just single family rentals and some of the smaller multifamily stuff I had. And so I've owned, retail, I've owned office, I've owned self-storage, I've owned just about everything over the years. But fast forward, 2008 absolutely crushed me down here, and lost pretty much everything that I had built. And started over again. Took me a couple years to start over. And when I started over, I was introduced to, very randomly, the world of mobile home parks, an asset class I had never considered before. And that was in late 2010, early 2011. A gentleman named Randy, met him through a mutual friend, had lunch with him, and found out that he owned mobile home parks here in Florida. And he sold me on a million different ways of why I should consider buying mobile home parks instead of going out and buying more multifamily properties. And so that's what happened. I kind of left that lunch meeting saying, "Hey, Kevin, you need to go buy one of these parks and either prove Randy right or wrong that these things are so great." And it took me a little over a year to buy the first one. I bought it up in Atlanta, and I literally owned that property up until about a year ago. We sold it. Bought a 34 space mobile home park in Atlanta. Turned that around, stabilized it, did really well. Bought another one, bought a third one, bought a fourth one, fifth one. And so now, we've structured the company a little differently. It's not just me anymore. We've got a team behind us. And so we currently own mobile home parks in 13 different states, Northeast, Southeast, and a few select Midwest markets. And that's our primary and core business. And that's what we've been doing now for, going on a decade.
Awesome. Well, I definitely want to do a deep dive on mobile home parks, because like I told you before we started recording, it's an asset class that I really don't know much about. And so I've been looking forward to this for that reason. But I wanted to point out a couple of little nuggets that you shared there in that sort of, origin story. And I think the first one is surround yourself with the right people. For those of you listening who might be in your early 20s, if you're hanging out with like an Xbox crowd playing Call of Duty, that's all you're going to accomplish. But if you're hanging out with real estate investors who are doing something that you want to be doing someday, I love how you said, I just did whatever, man. I go to Home Depot, I get him coffee, I follow him around, listen to what he's saying, listen to what he's doing. And that's how you absorb a lot of this stuff. And so, yeah, I think that's a great lesson. Just find yourself. It doesn't have to be a formal mentor type thing, but just surround yourself with the right people. And that you'll get a lot of mileage out of that for very little, cost, so to speak.
Yeah, what? Just to expand on that a little bit, one of the things I identified with David, I was trying to figure out, where did he have, where did he have just a little bit I knew about his business, like where did he have any voids or cracks? And as I'd mentioned, he was 25 years older than I, and so technology wasn't all that great with technology, even simple things such as email. PowerPoint, forget about it. And I remember watching him struggle through creating a PowerPoint presentation on a property he was buying for one of his private lenders, because they wanted that. They wanted him to put together a little pitch deck.
Send us your slide deck.
And he spent days and days on this thing. And it was only like 3 pages, right? It was literally 3 pages, 3-page PowerPoint. And I wasn't great at PowerPoint, but I sure as heck knew I could whip it together in a few hours, what he was hoping to do. And so I felt that was at least a place I could kind of get a foothold in, and where he saw value that I brought to the table, not just being an errand boy, but ultimately brought real value to his business and saved him hours, right? Because he was spending days on this thing, and
absolutely,
I whipped it up in 3 hours, and he got his time back.
Yep.
So.
And then the other thing that I really found interesting, because it felt, kind of like it was a parallel to so many real estate investors sort of path, is as you started out sort of wholesaling and fixing and flipping. Mm-hmm. And so many people do that. They start out as flippers or wholesalers or both. Like you said, you wholesale a few, you flip one, you wholesale a few, you flip one, you flip a few, and then you keep one, and that's kind of how a lot of people get started. But I think an interesting takeaway from that is, well, what's your end game? What's your niche? Where are you going to land? And I know for me, that was real estate brokerage and property management services here in the Tampa Bay area. For you, as the founder and owner of Sunrise Capital Investments, one of those niches has become mobile home parks. And right. So I think one of the lessons anyway is that you can't flip houses forever. It's hard work.
You can if you want a job. I've got some friends of mine and other people I know in the industry that have a very big business built around. I know a guy he's actually close to where I grew up in Pennsylvania. I mean, their company, they literally fix and flip over 300 homes a year. And it's mind boggling to me that operation to do that many homes. And these are like full blown rehabs, like $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 rehabs. And, but I can tell you what he does with that money. So he's got a well-oiled machine, but I can tell you that he's a very smart investor as well. And so he doesn't just take that money and then, keep creating a job for himself at the, the first of every year. He's taking that money and he has a very significant portfolio of cash flowing assets, lots of multifamily properties that he's a passive investor in, self-storage, and, the list goes on and on. And so whenever the time comes that he decides he wants to wind down his company or sell it, whatever he chooses to do, he's got plenty of cash flow from other streams that are ultimately going to allow him to continue living the lifestyle that he's been so accustomed to. So, but a lot of fixer and flippers, I don't see them doing that. Same with wholesalers, So it's a good way to create big chunks of money, but you have to understand what exactly to do, the responsible thing to do with that money that's coming in, so that you don't ultimately find yourself 10 years from now burned out, tired, and not wanting to flip another house or wholesale another house, but yet you don't have any passive investments that are, producing streams of income.
That's a great point. So if you flip that 100th house or whatever it is at the end of the chain, and that's all you've got, well, you've created chunks of cash, but you don't have cash flowing assets to fall back on.
And forget about the tax consequences of fixing and flipping. I mean, you're talking about, short-term capital gains. I mean, like you're literally giving, half of it away to Uncle Sam. If you don't,
the more you make, the more you pay in taxes.
Yeah. If you can't figure out another way to offset some of those gains that you're paying to Uncle Sam, then, I mean, again, that's not even a job. Like you're getting a job that's getting taxed at a higher rate than pretty much any other job. Right. So sure. It's a losing endeavor in the long run.
So on that note, how did you, I mean, you kind of started and you mentioned it, but how did you end up in mobile homes? And obviously it was successful when you started out buying a park here and there. And I guess why mobile homes?
And
it's probably a good question.
It is a great question. I at the end of the day, I'm a firm believer that, I mean, you can make money in real estate a million and one different ways, right? I mean, there's not necessarily one asset class that is better than the other. Now, I will say that, like, I'd much rather be in mobile home parks today than being, downtown office buildings, right? Because that industry just absolutely got crushed, and we'll see some fallout from that due to the pandemic. There's been just a massive shift in the work space and what have you. We don't know if it's going to go back. So, but with that being said, there's still money to be made in every different asset class. And so, I didn't obviously wake up one day and say, I want to go buy a mobile home park because it's so sexy and it's just a wonderful asset class. I didn't know anything about it. And as most of these things go, it's all about being present and being conscious and being willing to open-minded about opportunities that come your way. Right. And so again, a friend of mine said, hey, you need to go meet with this guy, Randy. I'm always all about meeting new people that are, own their own business in finance or in real estate, whatever. Like, just, your network is your net worth. And so I'm always open-minded to have lunch or coffee or meet with anyone new that I feel might be interesting, and ultimately I might be able to bring some value to them, and they could ultimately bring some value to me, and I can expand my network. So Randy was one of those guys. I was introduced to Randy through a mutual friend, and Randy literally had worked at a bank for 30 years in commercial finance, and upon retirement bought 3 mobile home parks here in Florida. And my buddy was like, you need to go meet with Randy. He's an interesting guy. He's a really nice guy. And as you're kind of rebuild things, like, he's just a good person to know since he was in the banking world. So it wasn't like, hey, go meet with Randy because he owns mobile home parks. It was like, go meet with Randy because he's in the banking world, and it's just, he's a good connection to have. And I met with him for lunch, and he kind of got my background. Like, you own single family, then you own multifamily. And this is at a point in my life when I was trying to rebuild, because I pretty much lost everything in the crash. And I was at a rebuilding phase in my life where I needed to decide like what I wanted to be when I grew up, right? I was starting all over again. And I had made the determination before I met with Randy that I was going to I wasn't going to buy any more single family homes. I didn't feel like spending the time and energy to go buy 100 or 200 more single family homes when I could go buy a 100 unit apartment complex or a 200 unit apartment complex. And so that was the path I chose that I felt was much more efficient to get to a scale again. And I expressed that to Randy, and he said, well, that's great. Apartments are good. You can make money there, but it's a competitive space. I mean, it's a very consolidated space. There's surely, if you're buying smaller stuff, there's still mom and pops out there, but you're competing against big investors that have, lower cost of capital, and you're going to be paying lower cap rates. He's like, why don't you look at mobile home parks? He's like, they're multifamily, just a different form of it. I'm like, okay, well, tell me more, right? Like, I don't know anything about them. I literally have never studied the business model. Just, give me more. And so that 2 hours basically was him telling me why mobile home parks were so much better than multifamily. Again, in his eyes, his perspective, they're both great asset classes, but some of the big things that really stuck out to me were that, number one, it was incredibly fragmented niche. I mean, back then, this is, again, 10 years ago, about 95% of the parks in the US were owned by mom and pop owners and operators, most that owned just one community, and then a small percentage that owned maybe 2 or 3. But there was a very small contingent of institutional investors, REITs and private equity firms. Whereas in the multifamily space, the majority of ownership is institutionalized. It's been consolidated over the years. And so he said that's a huge bonus because a lot of these owners are aging out of these assets. You got first and second generation owners that they built these things back in some as far back as the 50s and 60s and 70s, and they're getting old. Like they're getting old, and they're, again, aging out of these assets. But also, he's like, a lot of them, even though they might have a nice park, they haven't run it as efficiently as a professional might run it, or they haven't kept up with the market rates, right? They've owned it free and clear. They've gotten lax over the years. They don't do rent increases to keep up with CPI or inflation or any of that. And he's like, there's opportunity there. And he's like, another big thing is the turnover. He's like, it's an apartment. You might turn over a unit every 12 to 18 months on average. In a mobile home park, they own these homes, and it's very costly to move that home. And so very sticky residents, and today we've got some tenants in some of our parks that have lived there for 25 plus years, right? I mean, like it's a very, very sticky type scenario. Whereas in an apartment, they can just pack their car up and leave, right? In the middle of the night, if they so choose to, right? And so all those factors were very intriguing to me. The turnover one was huge. In addition to that, for the most part, we don't own the homes. And so, speaking to repairs and maintenance and just overall management intensity, we're not getting calls when their air conditioning breaks or when their toilet, breaks or their plumbing gets backed up or anything like that. We're in charge of the infrastructure of the park. So the water and sewer lines leading up to that home, and most of the time the roads. But as far as their independent unit themselves, if there's a roof leak or anything like that, it's their responsibility. And so, whereas in an apartment, it's quite the opposite, right? Like you're responsible for everything. And so just all these little details and factors that I'd never considered that were just very intriguing to me. And then the big last piece, as I mentioned, the competition, that's different today. The secret's kind of out with mobile home parks. There's, billions of dollars of private equity, institutional capital in this space. And there's a limited supply of mobile home parks, right? It's got a massive supply demand imbalance right now. And they're not really building new mobile home parks. In fact, it's the only asset class that has a diminishing supply. And so there's more and more money pouring in, but there's less and less product available for purchase. And so it's driven prices up and, cap rates down through the floor. And, but back then it wasn't like that at all. And so that was intriguing to me as well, that we could essentially go in undetected and not be in an overly competitive environment and buy assets that, as Randy put it, were cash cows. Right. And so anyways, just that's kind of what transpired during this meeting with Randy. And I left that meeting and I made a promise to myself. I'm like, man, I was so excited. And I'm like, I don't know anything about these other than what Randy just told me, but I was like, I'm going to give myself 12 months to learn as much as I can. And I'm going to go buy a park. At that point, I didn't have very much money because my credit was bad because I literally had to give a number of properties back to lenders after 2008. And so I was kind of on a shoestring budget, and I need to find an opportunity at the right price that had in a good market that had demand that I could get into, and then again either prove that concept right or prove it wrong. And that was that first park in Atlanta. It's 14 months after I met with Randy, bought that park in Atlanta, and kind of bootstrapped it. Drove up to Atlanta literally once a week, back and forth, which was crazy, for about 8 months, and got this place stabilized. And bought it for, back then it was, I think we paid $200 for it, put about another $350 into it. That thing cash flowed like crazy for the I guess almost 10 years that we owned it. I guess 9 years that we owned it, and turned around and sold it again a little over a year ago. We sold it for, I think it was 1.3 or $1.35 million, give or take. But it paid for itself time and time again.
Many times over.
Yeah. I mean, we refinanced all of our original capital out of it by year 2. And so we had nothing into it after, within the second year. And then, it had a net cash flow after debt service and operation expenses of about $100K a year, net. So, I mean, that was a winner time and time again. And so anyway, I saw an opportunity there. And so within the first 8 months of owning that one, before we even fully got it stabilized, I knew there was something there. And so we literally started pounding the pavement, looking for parks, far and wide, and literally started buying them as fast as we could find them. And literally did that up, and we're still doing it today. Not as buying as many today as what we had historically, just because prices are, kind of out of whack right now. But it's been a great asset class. It's treated us really well. I really enjoy it. And it's one of those niches. I love niches that, I would like to say there's riches and niches. In fact, I think there's a book called that, right? But I love niches I love going against the grain. Everyone's going in that direction now. Mobile home parks, the secret's out. We can still buy them. We just can't buy as many as what we'd like to. But going against the grain years back proved to be very profitable. And so we're always looking for, what is not the next, latest, greatest thing, but what is an opportunity that yet is not visible to the masses, right?
Yeah.
That ultimately probably will be, but what is that? And so that's kind of what led us to parking then, very recently led us down the parking path.
So even just in the last 5 minutes of you talking about trailer parks, you definitely opened my eyes to some things that really, I think, should be obvious, but I've just never given that much thought to the asset class. But the idea that you don't even own the trailers, you just own the lot. You're charging lot rent. And so you're not on the hook for maintenance and repairs other than to the roads and the infrastructure and the water and sewer,
Yeah. And I will say, for full transparency, in a perfect world, Jeff, in a perfect world, we wouldn't ever own any single home. But what happens is, over time, someone might pass away, and that home is in the park, and they're very expensive to move. So like 95% of the homes that leave the factory and go into a park, they live and they die in that park, right? Like, their next home.
Yeah, they're not that mobile.
yeah. Their next home, if anything, is going to be in a dumpster because, someone didn't take care of it. It's crumbled up and throw it away. Let's put another one here, right? It's not that easy, and so what happens, folks pass away, their heirs don't want it. They don't want their mobile home. And so, or people have to, leave the home for whatever reason. So that home stays there. And so, we've acquired homes just by happenstance from those things occurring. And, we'll go through the abandoned title process. Just like if someone left a car in your yard after a certain period of time, I don't know what it is here as far as a car is concerned here in our, in our county, but at a certain point in time, you would actually be able to go through an abandoned title process and become the owner of that car, right? And the same thing happens with mobile homes.
And a lot of people may not realize that mobile homes are titled as vehicles here in Florida. Yes. As a real estate broker, I can't even sell one. I'm not licensed to do that. You need a car dealer's license. And they have a title like your car would, a piece of paper. And so
it's like that in most states, actually.
Yeah. And so that's very different from a house where, the title company or an attorney does the title work to transfer the deed. On a mobile home, you go down to the DMV if you want to sell it and transfer that piece of paper over. So I have to imagine that there are a lot of perceptions about mobile homes, and maybe some of them are misperceptions. And I grew up in the rural South. I was born in Alabama and grew up in the panhandle of Florida. So I'm no stranger to mobile home parks. And so, that leads me to what is probably a pretty common question for you. It's like, and I don't want to insult anyone or anything like that, but do you get a lower class of tenant in a mobile home park compared to an apartment building or a single family rental?
Yeah, the best way to answer that question, it's a really good question, because I kind of felt the same way, when we kind of dove into the space, and that same negative stigma that you were aware of, I was aware of as well, and that's why the industry just happens to have a bad name. And so the way I answer that is, okay, so you can pick any. Let's pick Tampa Bay, right? Because that's where we're at right now. Let's talk about single family homes first. So stick built or block single family, detached homes. There's a wide spectrum of neighborhoods, right? You've got really low end neighborhoods that are single family homes. You've got very middle class neighborhoods, and you've got very, very high end neighborhoods. Let's talk about apartments now. Tampa Bay apartments. There's some really low end, rough, like you don't want to go there after dark type apartments where people get shot and stabbed and bad things happen. And then you got middle of the road apartments that service the middle class folks. And then you got actually some really high end luxury apartments. Literally the same exists with mobile home parks. You've got really rough, low end, they're in either the wrong side of town, they haven't been managed properly, whatever the reason being is, but they've got the wrong element inside of them. So whoever was managing it or whoever built it, either they built it in the wrong area or that area declined over time, or whoever's managing it just they don't have a good filtering process to keep the deadbeats out. But ultimately, one way or another, it turned into a bad place. And then you've got very middle of the road communities. They don't have a lot of amenities. They're more affordable housing. They're serving that middle class demographic, the good, hardworking folks. And they actually have, it's kind of funny, but like you've got high end communities like here in Florida. There's a lot of what we classify as lifestyle communities. They're not affordable. They're $900 a month lot rents, and the homes that are in there, you don't even own the land, and the home you're buying is a $150,000, $200,000 mobile home, right? And the people that choose to live in those homes, a lot of them being snowbirds, they own a home up north somewhere, and they are moving into that community, not necessarily because they can't afford something else, but they are moving there for the lifestyle. And so these are higher end communities. They're moving there because there's, there's tennis courts or pickleball courts, or there's shuffleboard, there's swimming pools,
community center.
Yeah, activities. And there's other retirees their age that are looking for the same thing. They want to, commingle with others that are in that stage of their life, but it's far from affordable. And so again, going back to it, it's for whatever reason, mobile home parks all got lumped into the one bucket of like trailer trash. But really at the end of the day, it's a wide spectrum. And I'll give you a good example. And we own the middle, and we own some nicer communities as well. We don't really own the trailer parks. Now we'll buy a really rough park if it's in the right part of town. So
Sure.
You can't change town, right? You can't change the town, but you can change the element inside the park. And so if it's in a good school district and it's in a phenomenal location, but it just hasn't been managed correctly, I know I can get rid of all the trash, clean up the place, and actually attract good quality folks in there. So we'll buy that all day long. But we don't own it any longer. We own a park up in Buffalo, New York. We own a couple up there, but we're no longer in New York for many reasons. It's a very challenging state to do business in. I'll leave it at that. But this community that we own, it was built in a suburb of Buffalo, and it was in a walkable downtown area. Jeff, you're very familiar with like Dunedin. So think of like a Dunedin, and think of like, the downtown Dunedin area. Think about maybe, 2 blocks outside of the immediate downtown. So like still like everything's walkable. There was this mobile home park. And so this mobile home park was built, about 30 years ago by a local farmer. He did a phenomenal job. It was gorgeous, really high-end homes. Most people that live there, they chose to live there. It wasn't affordable. In fact, the homes in this mobile home park actually sold for more than the stick-built homes did in the town itself.
Location.
That and just most of the homes in this town were older, so they were built back in like the 40s and 50s and things of that nature. And this community, in the grand scheme of things, was newer, had newer inventory, but it also had a, being that it was a subdivision, it had a very different feel than that of this. The homes that were in the town itself. I mean, there wasn't really a collective subdivision. It was just a downtown area. And so these homes on average sold for more than out of the stick-built homes. So people chose to live there. It wasn't the affordable option. They chose to live there.
Sure.
So again, there's a wide spectrum of qualities.
It makes perfect sense when you talk through it. And I think that perception is often a misperception. And I think another one that I had prior to hearing you talk, because you talked about refinancing and pulling out your capital and stuff. I was under the impression that mobile homes are a cash asset. But and maybe that's the trailer, but not the land that the park sits on. And so, what are the financing options like for mobile home parks?
That's a great question. I mean, I would tell you that 10 years ago, there wasn't many. There weren't a lot of options. A lot of banks didn't understand the asset class, and so there was a good pros and cons with that. The pros were, any sellers of a mobile home park, it was understood that more than likely they would have to carry financing.
Right.
You'd have to be a cash dealer. They have to carry financing. Like that was just a norm. That was a normal scenario. That's definitely changed over the last decade. Now there's a litany of banks, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they're very, very active in the space. So there's a number of CMBS lenders that are in the space, tons of local and regional banks that are in the space that understand the asset class now. And so as far as the mobile homes themselves are concerned, every bank looks at it differently. A lot of lenders don't want to put value on the homes themselves, even if you own them, right? So if I own some of the mobile homes, they still don't want to tie up that collateral because it's personal collateral.
They don't consider them real estate. They're personal. They're like a car.
Even if they're rented, even if we own one of the homes and let's say the lot rent's $300 a month, but we're getting in total $800. So we're getting $300 for the lot, $500 for the home. They're not going to give me a value based on the income of that home portion, only on the lot portion itself. And so again, there's some banks that will lend on the entirety. Like they'll look at it as a whole and they'll kind of classify it as a horizontal apartment complex or something like that. But without going too deep, but the valuations get very skewed when you start capitalizing the actual value of the home itself, because ultimately the home itself is a depreciating asset, right? It's a personal piece of property. And so most banks want to stay away from owning the homes themselves. They just want the infrastructure and the land. So,
well, it's interesting to hear that there are Fannie, Freddie, almost, normal financing options out there now, because again, the perception is, well, it's got to be cash or seller financing, and that's about it.
We're in the middle of a couple Fannie Mae refinances right now on a number of communities that we own, and we've got a number of other Fannie loans in place. They're the best. I mean, they have certain minimums, like they won't give a loan. That's, I think their minimum it's either $2 or $3 million. So like, that's kind of like their minimum loan amount. But if if your park's in the right market and it's the right quality that they're looking for, they are hands down the best option out there. It's non-recourse. They'll do a 30-year amortization, a 10-year term, a couple years of interest only, and have the most competitive rates. And so they are hands down the best option, but they won't lend on just anything. So it's got to fall within their parameters.
So if I'm hearing you right, it's almost like you guys employ sort of a BRRRR strategy that people do on single family homes. You buy, you renovate, you rent it out, and then you refinance, and then you repeat. But you guys are kind of buying the park, stabilizing the park, refinancing, and then repeating. And so it's not a completely different strategy, but I assume you're not renovating the trailers themselves. You're just fixing up the infrastructure. And I guess the other thing that it really highlights is how important property management is, or that management aspect of who are the tenants. Are they being screened? Do we have the right people living in the park? And that, I would imagine, is one of the many keys to success.
Absolutely. I mean, again, same goes with if you've got single family rentals or multifamily rentals. I mean, it's more important if you have a more collective community like a mobile home park or an apartment complex. If you start letting some bad elements in there and you're not doing a good job of filtering out the applicants, then very quickly you're going to push out the good folks, because they don't want to live next to deadbeats, right? And so community. I've seen apartments and mobile home parks spiral out of control incredibly quickly. I mean, like literally 12 to 18 months, like night and day difference when they're not managed correctly. And so, it's definitely I wouldn't say it's not an intensive management business, but it's all about what are your front end systems, right? Making sure that you've got the screening processes in place, and exactly what type of tenant that you're actually looking for, so that when it comes through the door, it, and you put them in and you decline everyone else, right?
Sure. So for a listener who might be, sitting at home and they just bought a mobile home park, or maybe they inherited or whatever, and now they're like, oh my God, what have I done? What are some things that you look for when you drive through a park or walk through a park? What are some red flags or things that kind of catch your attention when you're trying to figure out what needs to be fixed here? How do we get this from a Class D park to a Class B park?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like I'll go back to first location, right? Like that's applicable no matter what you're buying. You can change whatever needs fixed at the park itself, but you can't change the location. And so if you're going to buy in an inferior location that's got maybe higher than average crime or not so good school districts, we're catering to families in a lot of our parks, and they've got kids that they want. Even middle class and in the lower socioeconomic levels, they want to send their kids to good school, right? Like, sure. And so, but if you're not buying something in a good area, then I can't tell you how to fix that. I'm not sure. I haven't figured that one out yet, but assuming that's in a good area, some of the common elements that we look at when we go into a park, aside from the financials, right? Because there's things to fix, on the operations side as well. But the more cosmetic fixes are, roads. I mean, all too often we see owners that just, they just take all the money, live their lifestyle, whatever they're doing with it, but they don't ever put it back into the property itself. So you got potholes and you got, speed bumps that are broken, and just, it's an unpleasant experience driving through community because the roads are in incredibly rough shape. So that's an easy fix. It costs money, but that's an easy fix. Another one would be just general rule enforcement, right? Like having a set group of rules and policies that the residents have to adhere to, meaning, they've got to have skirting around the bottom of their home. Their home can't have mildew growing on the outside of it. They can't have 8 cars parked in a driveway that was built for 2 cars. They can't have cars in the grass. They can't have, 3 refrigerators sitting outside. Just again, common things that if you let go, that if you don't enforce, get out of control very quickly. And so we know we can clean those up very quickly just by basically saying, if you don't do this, if you don't comply with these rules, like within this time frame, we're going to ultimately not renew your lease. Because remember, we own the land. We have the ability. We've got some leverage in the sense that we can truly non-renew their lease, and then it's up to them to figure out what the heck to do with their home. Most of the time, they don't have the money to move it, and so most folks come into compliance very quickly when you start really putting the pressure on. And so, again,
that was going to be my next question, because thinking in terms of a multifamily and single family property manager, my ultimate hammer is an eviction. Yeah. But how do you evict someone when they own the home, but it's just parked on your lot? And
Yeah, every state works a little different, but the eviction is for the individuals themselves. And then ultimately what occurs is every state's different, but they have a period of time to move the home. I think in Florida it's 30 days. So after you evict them, just like you would a normal eviction, you evict the individual themselves. They have 30 days to come redeem their property, personal property, which is, the mobile home. And if they don't move that mobile home in that period of time, you've got to go through, as I mentioned earlier in the show, you got to go through what's called the abandoned title process. And so there could be a lien holder on that property. So if a bank has a lien on the title, you can negotiate with them just to, discount on the lien, give me the title and then turn around and resell the property. If it has no lien on it, then you go through an abandoned title process to where ultimately it's typically like a 90-day process to where you get a new title issued in your name again. And then you have the opportunity to either fix the home up, rent it, sell it, whatever you'd like, whatever your business model is. And so that's exactly how it's done. We've got a number of evictions that we had happen over the last couple of weeks so let me state this. Very rarely does it happen when it's a tenant-owned home, meaning that when the home is owned by the tenant, very rarely does it ever get to the point of an eviction. Because here's why. In most cases, that home is probably the most valuable asset that they own.
Sure.
And if their lot rent is $500 a month, I can guarantee, I don't care where it's at. Let's talk about where we live right now. There is absolutely nowhere else you can go live. You can't even live in the grossest of apartments for $500 a month. And so most of the time they'll figure out any way to come up with that $500 or $1,000 that they might be late in order to not lose that roof over their head. Because again, that's probably the most valuable asset that they have. Whereas if in like an apartment scenario, they can easily just pack up and leave. They can easily just move on.
Sometimes they don't even pack up. They just leave their stuff behind.
Most of them, they just leave their stuff behind. Yeah. So, but, and then, probably the more common scenario is if they're not going to make up their rent, what they'll do is they'll turn around and put their home up for sale at a very fair price, just literally fire sale it, whatever. And then someone else will ultimately buy it, move in, and now become your new resident. So very rarely does it ever get to the point where they actually are willing to lose a home that's worth $20,000, $30,000 or $40,000. We just had one happen in Maryland where literally the home, anyway, I can't believe we got to that, but their home, it's probably worth about $40,000 and has no lien on it. And they literally had a year to figure this out, and they didn't. And we literally evicted them out. And now we're going through the abandoned title process. We're going to be into maybe about $5,000 of legal fees. And we got a home that's literally worth $40,000 that we could turn around and sell quickly for $35,000. Right. And so, but that's an anomaly. That doesn't happen all that often.
So I started out by asking why mobile homes, and you did a brilliant job of answering that questions about why the asset class. But I think the one thing we didn't touch on is what kind of returns are we talking? I mean, how good is good, and what kind of cap rates and things are you seeing in the mobile home space?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I will say that again, lots of competition is coming to the space. Blackstone, Carlyle Group. All the big private equity firms are trying to pour billions of dollars into this sector, and there's a limited supply. And so that's ultimately driven prices up and cap rates down. And so there was a period of time, I think back in 2020 where, multifamily, was basically the lowest cap rate across all the other asset classes, traditional multifamily. Mobile home parks dip below that. I think, the Green Street data showed that on a national scale, multifamily was on average trading at I think it was like a 4.4 cap or 4.5 cap, and mobile home parks trended below that number. And so it obviously depends on the location, where it's at, the quality of the community. But again, with the supply demand imbalance that we're seeing, there even C-grade parks, C-class parks are trading at all-time low cap rates. And so, from a retail standpoint, so we're value add investors. So I like to buy things that I can go in. If I buy it at a 4.5 cap, I know that there's upside that, ultimately once I stabilize it, my new basis is going to be, a 6.5 cap or 7 cap, right? Like that's how we buy. But stabilized parks, if it's truly stabilized and it's a, let's call it a B-class park, they're going to be trading. If it's in Florida, it's going to be trading probably for a sub 4 cap right now.
Wow. I mean, that's obviously lower than expected, but I could understand why. The work has been done. It's just generating cash flow at that point.
Yeah, and a lot of the buyers here in Florida, you got lots of institutional capital. Their cost of capital is very different, and so that's the challenge. So like it's a nice thing that institutional capital came into our space, because when we exit out of something, we're getting a premium price for it. But when there are competition on the buy side, their cost of capital is very different than ours, right? Like we're raising our capital from retail high net worth individuals, and so our weighted cost of capital, might be in the 6% range, where they're getting their money from a sovereign wealth fund or a pension fund, and their cost of capital is 2%.
Right.
So they can buy at a 4 cap and still have a 200 basis point spread, which will absolutely produce the returns that they're looking for.
Yeah. And I had a very similar conversation with somebody earlier this week about why are people willing to pay so much for these multifamily assets? There's no way they can cover debt service and yada, yada, yada. I said, well, in many cases, they're not covering debt service, or their cost of capital is very, very low. So they're just parking the cash in an appreciating asset. And if you look back 2 years, it's 20%, 20%. If you've got the $1 million to parking it in an asset that's going up by 20% per year is not a bad deal, even if the cap rate is exceedingly low.
Yeah. So you have to look at the profile. When someone asks that question, you have to look at the profile of the buyer, of who they're like, whatever the asset is, like who are the people that are buying it at a 4 cap or a sub 4 cap, right? Who are they? More than likely, it's probably either it's a deal that has a lot of upside.
Right.
It's a value add deal that ultimately after doing X amount of renovation dollars to each unit, we can, expect a $200 to $300, renewal premium on new leases, or it's a group that's buying an asset that's fairly stabilized, but their cost of capital is incredibly low. And they're just looking to park capital and create a spread, and their spread only needs to be maybe 150, 200 basis points, and they're getting it even though they're buying at a 4 cap.
Right.
So
tough to compete against those as buyers, but it's great. But it's great when you own the asset. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and another big consideration as well. I mean, honestly, you mentioned like they just need to park capital, but there's a big tax benefit as well, especially with the ability to take accelerated depreciation, all in 1 year, with whether it be a multifamily or mobile home park. And so you got a lot of groups that are you got to look at it from the tax benefit as well. When wondering why a buyer might be paying, a certain price for, a higher price than that of what you might have paid for it. They might be underwriting it in a very different scenario.
Different goals. Yeah.
That's it.
Even if they broke even on the property, if they saved $250,000 on taxes the following year, that's why they did it.
Yes.
So you mentioned a couple of times the concept of building a mobile home park, when the owner built this park, and it led me to think, well, what's involved with building a mobile home park? It's just land. I mean, I understand you got to have parking pads and sewer and water, but talk to us about like, how could you build a park if you had if you were lucky enough to own a bunch of land in a great location, but also what is how do the cities view these in terms of zoning? I can imagine there are some challenges there. And that's why a lot of parks tend to not be in, downtown Dunedin, is because zoning doesn't permit it. And so have you come across those challenges? Or are you mainly just buying pre-existing parks?
Yeah, we're mostly buying pre-existing. We've done some expansions in a few parks where we've had excess land available to expand upon the park, but we've never developed from ground up. And there's lots of headwinds that pose challenges to those that want to go down that road. And one of the big ones being, you speak to building a mobile home park in the path of progress. Number one, you got the NIMBY syndrome, right? When not my backyard, right? No one wants to have their $500,000 home next to a mobile home park. Because guess what? That mobile home park might be a beautiful high-end mobile home park. That individual still placing it in the bucket of, you're right, wrong side of the tracks. Like it's going to attract the wrong clientele.
There goes the neighborhood.
There goes the neighborhood. Right. And so that's a very challenging headwind to fight. Another big one, again, just the general stigma associated with it. And so when it goes in front of, the zoning board, they're going to immediately throw it in the bucket as well. Of everyone knows we need affordable housing, but no municipalities actually truly want to address the issue. Right. And so mobile home parks are a brilliant way to start addressing the affordable housing need. But again, they get lumped into the bucket of a negative stigma, and that's not what we want in our community. And then, the other big challenge associated with it is you're in present time, assuming you can get a piece of land, again, and most time it's going to be out in the middle of a rural area, because you're not going to get the approval to put it in Dunedin or any of the other, already populated areas.
Right.
The number one, even the tax basis for the towns, right? There is a much who they perceive is going to live in that mobile home park, but also even from a tax basis, a 100 space mobile home park is going to take up a decent amount of horizontal space, a couple of acres. They're going to do much better from a tax standpoint if they allow a 100 unit or 200 unit apartment complex to be built there with the mixed use, retail in the bottom, right? They're going to attract much more revenue dollars to their city.
Yeah. Or even 100 single family homes. Basis. Now you've got a property tax base that you're not getting out of mobile homes.
I wanted to hit on that one. So that's a big one. But even, today it's interesting. So there are some parks that get built throughout the country. Mostly in like rural areas, like, if you wanted to go build one up in, not necessarily Ocala, but, in the outskirts, like go to like the middle of the state, you could probably get approval to do that. But in today's world, the cost of, labor and material, I don't know if you could even, I'm not sure if you can actually build it at a cost that would ultimately give you a desired ROI. And then if you could, there's such a backlog of mobile homes right now. Like we've got a number of homes on order, like we're on average waiting 12 to 18 months to buy a mobile home.
Yeah, I was just thinking, even if you build the perfect park, that doesn't mean they will come.
That's it.
And they're not going to come all at once. So you got this gradual buildup of your revenue stream.
Yeah, the more common, like what we see getting built for the most part nowadays are luxury RV parks. And these luxury RV parks have they have a component of transient. So people that have their campers or fifth wheels or their class A's that come in for, a week, a month, maybe a few months at a time. And then the other contingent of these RV parks are what are called park models, which, you live here in Florida. You've probably seen them. Maybe you don't know what they are, but basically a park model they're like a mini mobile home. They're actually tied down. They look like a mobile home, but they have a unique classification. So under 400 square feet, HUD does not regulate. HUD gets involved in mobile homes once they're at 400 square feet and larger. If they're under 400 square feet, they get classified as an RV. And so they're allowed to, whereas a typical HUD mobile home would not be able to go in an RV park. The zoning it would prohibit it. One of these 399 square foot park models, which all the manufacturers make, they've been making them for decades.
Sure.
They go there. And so they get tied down and they become either a seasonal, seasonal home for snowbirds or what have you. Some of you are even year round. And so most of these RV parks that are getting built have these park models. They have transient, but then they also have a lot of amenities that are catering to that demographic. They've got pools. They've got, again, shuffleboard, they've got community centers and things of that nature. But that's pretty much the only thing that are getting built, but they're not affordable. They're not helping the affordable housing crunch that we find ourselves in. It's a very high end, wealthy demographic that are, enjoying their time in those types of parks. But that's for the most part what are getting built across the country. As
you were saying that, I was thinking, my wife is actually from the UK and we travel there frequently, at least prior to COVID we did. And, they have mobile home parks in the UK, and you wouldn't think of English, Welsh countryside mobile home park, but they call them caravan parks.
Yes.
And they're really holiday, vacation destinations. They're the joyful place on the seaside where you go to spend a week, while you're on vacation. They don't have that same stigma attached to them as we do here. So, but yeah, you mentioned, the whole supply and demand and the housing market crunch, pressures that we're feeling. You're right. It does seem like mobile homes are a logical, quick, easy way to build a whole lot of them and put them in, nice, clean places and solve some of the affordable housing problem. But it's interesting how some of these stigmas and the tax base and the other things we talked about, kind of push pressure or push them away from the core metro areas. So yeah, it's definitely a really, really interesting asset class with a lot of quirks, but a lot of upside as well.
I mean, most of the parks that we see nowadays that are kind of in the, they're in not just in the path of progress, like, progress already happened there, but 50 years ago when they were built or 60 years ago.
Right. That was very visionary back then. Yeah. I'm thinking I'm here in Northeast St. Petersburg, and there are two huge mobile home parks on 4th Street, which is a key corridor. One of them just got bought, and they took all the trailers away. They're building a brand new, apartment complex basically. But the one on the other corner is still there. And it kind of makes you wonder, like, who thought, 50 years ago that would be a good place for a trailer park, and who owns it now? And what are their exit strategies? That is interesting that those people were.
That was probably cheap land back then.
Exactly. They were cognizant enough back then to put these parks in the path of progress, or maybe they didn't know. Maybe they just got lucky.
No, it's probably the part of town that the county didn't really. Maybe they didn't have they probably didn't have a zoning ordinance back then in that part of town, and it was cheap land, and and more than likely, probably back then there wasn't even like municipal infrastructure there. Like they probably had a on-site treatment,
septic tank or a well or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they converted over time, but like as the progress made it to them. But it's interesting again. But these things, we're talking parks that were built. Most of the ones here in Florida were built, as far back as like the 50s. But the big percentage of them were in the 60s, and 70s when the majority were built. So,
right. So what is your role at Sunrise? If somebody says, "Hey, I've got some money and I want to invest in a mobile home park," do they come to you? Do you broker that deal? Do you put a fund together? Do you act almost like a real estate broker, but for trailers? I mean, what exactly do you do when it comes to mobile home park investing for, other investors?
Yeah, well, we're not a brokerage firm. I'm not a licensed agent or broker. No one on our team is, but I mean, we're a private equity investment firm that ultimately, invests in mobile home parks and parking lots. And so at the present time, to answer your question, we've got a fund that we've got a number of funds, but one that's currently open that's accepting investment dollars from accredited individuals. And ultimately, at present time, that fund owns 9 assets, and we'll be buying a few more before we close it out. And so anyone that has an interest in learning more about either the current assets in that fund or just investing with our team and what that looks like, I mean, they can go over to investwithsunrise.com, and we've got a whole like webinar and kind of a pitch deck that they can read through. But as far as like what I do for the company, I'm not in the investor relations side of the business. We've got my business partner, and we've got a team that ultimately work with our investors that, keep them updated on, monthly and quarterly progress as far as reports and things of that nature. My side of the business is mostly on the acquisition side. So pretty much every deal that comes through the door, it's passed. Either I'm the one that actually went out and fetched it and found it, or it one way or another passes through my hands. And I basically say yay or nay and know whether or not it's a good fit for the fund. And so that's pretty much my role there. So anyway, I'm the deal finder, I guess is the best way to put it.
Awesome. So investwithsunrise.com if you want to learn more.
That's correct.
So I know you are an extremely busy guy, Kevin, because it's not just mobile homes. You've got your fingers in a lot of different pies, so to speak. How in the world did you find time to write that book that's sitting on the shelf behind you? And what's the book about?
Well, it's kind of embarrassing. So like, yes, it did take some time to get the book done, but it shouldn't have taken 3 years, which is what it took. So, but no, I started writing it 3 years ago. And it just, as like a lot of things, other priorities came into play. And so I got it about 90% done. And then it just sat for about 1.5 years. And thank God for my business partner. He really kicked me in the rear about 6 months ago and said, we're getting that book out, hell or high water. And ultimately, so I'm going to give him the kudos for actually making sure that it got out. So I definitely don't want to take credit because he made it happen. But anyway, I wrote it, so that's worth something, right? But as far as why I wrote the book and what it's about, the book is it's a culmination of kind of my life story over the last 20 years of my progression through different types of investments, challenges with the Great Recession, the different asset classes I've owned, what I like, what I dislike. And so there's elements of that there, but then also, my podcast, I started podcasting about 8 years ago, and my show is predominantly focused on commercial real estate investments. And I try to hit on all the different asset classes. I've had guys on that own, hundreds of millions of dollars in office, medical office, retail, self-storage, industrial, and the list goes on and on. And so I've learned a lot over the years from these operators, a lot of these operators that have, $1 billion companies. And so I've taken, the different lessons and the strategies along with my own and kind of put them together in that book. So that's a big contingent of the book right there, is just my personal story kind of paired with the lessons I've learned over the last 20 years, and more specifically the last 8 years of the various interviews I've done with, again, just, highly successful folks in the real estate industry. And then as far as, the remainder of the book, or I guess the other piece of it would be just, really what does it mean to be a cash flow investor? And, one of the things I learned early on from David is, really using real estate to help facilitate whatever lifestyle it is you want to live. Right. And knowing that you're not going to want to work, the rest of your life. And maybe you have a job you love, maybe you're a school teacher and you love what you do. You love teaching kids. Even though you don't make a lot of money, you love what you do. A lot of people can't say they love what they do, but let's just say that you're a school teacher, you love what you do. Well, ultimately you might not make as much money as what you need to live the lifestyle that you live. And so, buying real estate that produces cash flow, even when you're not working, right? So when the day comes, you don't want to go back to that job. You've got a number of assets that can ultimately allow you to continue living the lifestyle, or even get you to a higher lifestyle that you had dreamed of. And so that's really the definition of being a cash flow investor. But also, more importantly than that, I'd say is, for me, I can kind of tell you what it means to me. And I go into detail in this book. And I know you're a family man as well, Jeff. I mean, my family is literally everything to me. I've got 2 young boys, 5 and 8, and real estate really allows me the flexibility to spend as much time as I want with them. I mean, I make sure that at least, unless I'm traveling, which I try to limit as much as possible, I try to see them off to school, at least 4 days out of the week, and a lot of times it's 5 days out of the week. I have the ability to go pick them up if I want to. My wife's got the flexibility as well. So we kind of trade on and off. Sometimes we fight about who gets to go pick them up from school, right? Because I just enjoy being involved in their life. And, I go to their sporting events. I make sure that I'm at their swim meets and all that. And we take a lot of vacations together. We travel. And it wouldn't be possible without real estate. And so, or more specifically, without cash flowing real estate that, when I'm away for a week or two, the checks still come in, right? And I'm not going to say they just come in by themselves. We got people that help facilitate that, I think enforce that when they're not coming in. But it's just it's again going back to the job, right? Like having to start all over again January 1st of every year. Being a cash flow investor, shows you a different way, and that way is leveraging commercial real estate, whatever that might be, to find that path.
Yeah. And I think the juxtaposition there is, it's not that you don't want to, but it's just very, very difficult to do a lot of those things that you mentioned when you're working a very rigid schedule, 8 to 4, 9 to 5, 40, 50-hour work week. You got to work on the weekends, do overtime. It just doesn't leave a lot of time to do those family activities and vacations. Or if you do take a vacation, that means 2 weeks that you're not getting paid. And in some cases, obviously people have vacation days or whatever, but yeah, it's just a different mindset, and the cash flow from other assets such as real estate certainly enables you to do more of those things. For people who can't see it over your shoulder, the book is called The Cashflow Investor, correct?
That's it.
And it's available on Amazon. Do you sell it directly or?
No, well, you can go to my website, but it will take you to Amazon anyway. So yeah, it's Amazon, but you can get a paperback, a hardcover, and also a Kindle version as well. Have not finished the audiobook version yet.
You're gonna have
I'll make sure that
some famous actor do the voiceover.
No, I'm doing it myself. Which is what's taken so long. I kind of dove into it and realized that it was a much bigger mountain to climb than what I had originally anticipated. So
you couldn't get Morgan Freeman or anything.
Yeah, right. That'd be funny. That would be good. That's a good idea.
And then I also want to mention your podcast one more time. It's Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow with Kevin Bupp.
That's correct.
It's above your head behind you there.
So I actually I do have 2 shows. So Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow, that's the one I've been doing the longest, for 8 years. And I'm consistent with it. Like, we put out a number of episodes a week.
And hats off to you for 8 years. I mean, I know firsthand, this is a lot of work. It's a lot of logistics and just a lot of behind the scenes effort that goes into these.
And then the other one, what you see here is I launched that show back in 2016. It's a mobile home park investing podcast. I think I did a good consistent, like 3 years of it. I think there's about 120 episodes up there, and they're all very very nitty gritty down to the operational side of the business. About half of them are operational side of the business, like literally me kind of going through how we've built the company, how do we do this, that, and the other inside the company. And then the other half are me interviewing other mobile home park owners and operators. And so anyone that has an interest in mobile home park investing, even though I don't do that show anymore, it's still there. All the episodes are still relevant today. It's been a couple years since I've recorded one, but all those episodes are relevant. So if you have even the remote interest in this niche, investing in mobile home parks or buying a park, go dive into those episodes. A lot of the earlier episodes were all kind of very granular in nature. And then the later episodes were a lot of interviews with other operators kind of talking about the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between with owning a mobile home park.
So today was kind of a little taste, but if you want to do multiple deep dives, you've got 3 years worth of episodes there in the can, so to speak.
I just got a little too tired with doing 2 shows, so
I can't even imagine. So obviously we're a little constrained on time, but you've recently pivoted from parks to parking. And I'm just curious why that is and what are some of the benefits of investing in parking lots and parking structures besides the obvious.
Sure. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we always like to look at, what are some of the fragmented niches and in real estate, and where's the herd not going? And the herd's running as fast as possible towards mobile home parks, which is, creating challenges with buying opportunities that have a margin of safety there. And so parking lots, as we and we've looked at many other asset classes, parking lots kind of came on my radar about 4 years ago. I interviewed a guy on my show that happened to be one of like only 3 parking lot brokers in the country. Like it's such a niche asset class. There's not even like brokerage teams that are really focused on that space. And so, but I interviewed the top parking broker in the country, and I never knew anything about that business model. And again, just like the mobile home park conversation I had with Randy, I interviewed this guy for an hour and I was just blown away. I'm like, I had never even considered, like, I know someone owns this parking lot in this garage, but like, what does that business model look like? And so again, I was just very intrigued with not only the business model, but the fragmentation, the marketplace, lots of mom and pops that have owned these lots for many, many years. Many that haven't adopted technology, there's still, you can still find those old, remember those
stick
metal
your
boxes
money in
where
with
you
the little
stick your money in,
stick,
like that. All I see is dollar signs when I see those, and they don't exist as much as they used to. So, but if you see one of those, or you see a physical parking lot attendant that's taking money, I can promise you that not all that money is making it back to the owner. And if they're only taking cash, a lot of people don't carry cash nowadays, right? And so, like, I might not be able to park there because they don't take credit cards, right? And so, anyway, there's lots of opportunity to buy assets that are mismanaged or underperforming, that are in desirable locations. But, the important thing about parking, like kind of where the opportunity lies, is, at least with a surface parking lot, is finding a surface lot in a market where it's being used, where the current use of parking still has a higher value today than that of it being redeveloped into a higher and better use. And so using like a St. Pete as an example, downtown St. Pete, it's already past that phase. Any of the, parcels in downtown that used to be a surface parking lot, a developer would be willing to pay 2, 3, 4 times more than what, maybe we would pay as from an income perspective,
right, for that highest and best use as a skyscraper or whatever.
And so where the opportunity lies is that, number one, it's really hard to get, very rare that you would get approved if you wanted to knock down a building and turn it into a surface parking lot in any city. It'd be very challenging. They don't want more parking lots. It's kind of like mobile home parks. Like in their mind, like they're not attractive. They bring no value to the, to the local economy, generally speaking. Just it's kind of like a sore thumb. And so if we can find a parking lot in a growing market that, has some upside potential, again, instituting technology, accepting credit cards, getting rid of the person on site that's collecting cash, or the meter box that we talked about, there's a lot of opportunity there. But then knowing that parking lot will never have a lower use than what it does today.
Right.
If it's in a desirable growing market, it will never have a lower use than what it currently is today, which is a piece of asphalt or maybe even just a piece of gravel. And so it's only upside from there on. And we're not developers, we're not speculators. And so we want to buy it based on its current income potential, knowing that, again, it's only going to get better.
Yeah, this is just the baseline. And the use could only go up.
A lot of cities now, there's a major wave happening across the U.S. where a lot of cities are removing the parking minimums for new developments. And so developers, if they can put another 10 apartment units instead of 10 extra parking spaces, they're going to choose the apartment units, right, over the parking spaces. And so a lot of major cities are eliminating the parking minimums for new developments, meaning that parking supply is in higher demand because like what's available is getting constrained really, really tight, right?
Not only did they take away some parking spaces, but they moved in 10 extra people who now need to park.
Yes, exactly. So it's a long-term strategy. We're buying in, mostly secondary growth markets. Again, I used like the Tampa or St. Pete as an example. It'd be very challenging to buy anything in downtown Tampa or St. Pete that you would be able to pay a higher dollar amount than that of a developer that's going to go vertical with it. So, but lots of opportunity there, just a good cash flow and covered land play. But the beautiful part about that business model. So let me give the second piece here, and I'll make it quick because I know we're running out of time, but there's lots of professional operators in this space, local and regional and national operators, management companies that manage parking. And we've built our business model around, finding parking lots that are being mismanaged. Maybe they're being managed by a local management company that's just hands off. They haven't integrated technology. They're not doing good enforcement. We find the best operator for that respective lot, and then typically put it out for bid, to them and as well as two others, and then look to get a triple net lease. And that's kind of how we build our business model. So every asset that we currently own in the parking space, we're not managing it. We don't have a management infrastructure in house. We're basically finding the best in class operator that's willing to pay us the most in a triple lease format, so that we are completely hands off.
So you're not fixing anything. You're not managing anything. You're just collecting your check. Yeah.
Make sure that whatever, they're pricing their margin in there, right? Whatever their upside margin is, and that's fine. Let them make money, but give me my monthly check every month. And don't call me about anything else, right?
The landlord's dream right there.
That's it.
So a couple of closing questions. And I think we had a similar discussion about 6 months ago when I was on your show. But and I think you live here, so you have an interesting take on this. But where do you see the Tampa Bay and the Florida real estate market going, in the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's funny. I feel I'm like an old man now, right? I used to like joke with my parents and they'd make comments like this, but it's like, I wish it would slow down. Like it's I think the secret's out. It's the best way to put it. The secret's out. Like you and I have known for a long time that the Tampa Bay area is it's a wonderful place to live. It's a wonderful place to raise a family. I love the weather. I love the water. We've got some of the nicest beaches in the world here. I mean, there's just so many desirable aspects of the Tampa Bay area. And I felt like, it was steady growth, but I feel like the pandemic really let the secret out. People realized how much they didn't like the gray winter, in addition to being locked inside during the gray winter, right? And realized how affordable, relatively speaking, the Tampa Bay market was, or Florida in general, right? And I don't, Jeff, I don't think that trend's slowing down. I think that train is rolling, and I don't see it slowing anytime soon. And I kind of like to relate it to what like Southern California or just California was probably back in like the 80s, right? Like it was go in the 70s and like you could go buy a house anywhere. I mean, and for probably $100,000. I mean, like it was California was affordable to just about any middle class family. And that dynamic really shifted in the late 80s and then in the 90s when it boomed in popularity, and people realized like it's a beautiful place. The topography is amazing. The weather, the climate's phenomenal. Like there's no humidity. It's, this very temperate, climate, and it's just a lovely place to live until it got all, crazy in the politics side, but it's just a wonderful place to live. And now it's literally impossible. Number one, there's just the density so high in most of the major cities in California. And number two, the prices are so incredibly high. It's priced everyone out. And so unfortunately, I don't like to say this, but I feel like Florida, the major markets in Florida, Tampa, Orlando, definitely Miami, and then some even the secondary markets like the Sarasotas, the Fort Myers, the Naples of the world. And then you got Jacksonville, but even like the Panhandle, like Pensacola and all that. I think we're going to be the next California. I mean, we're already heading that way.
You're not the first person who I've heard say that. And that's it really makes you think like, well, if, what will this look like 20, 30 years from now? And what should we be doing now as a result? And I think the answer is buy more real estate, buy as much as you can, whenever you can.
Obviously, it still has to be able to support itself, right? I mean, unless you're just independent wealth and you can just park money and it doesn't have to get a return. But I agree.
Invest for cash flow, but the appreciation should come.
That's it. it's interesting. You look at any of the middle class families that live here now that have owned a home. Let's say if they bought the home within the last 5 years, and they make a modest middle of the road income, combined household income, let's call it less than 100,000, right? $50,000 to $80,000. They're probably going to be stuck in that home for the next that home now is their retirement.
It's you could sell it, but you wouldn't be able to buy anything else.
That's it. That home will be their retirement. When the time comes, that home will be worth $1.5 million, 5 times what they paid for it, 6 times what they paid for it. And they'll have to make a decision when it comes to retirement. Hopefully they have enough other retirement where they maybe don't have to sell it, they can rent it. Or if they want to, truly move to a retirement community or something like that, they might have to actually sell that home and move to a different state, right? Go to Georgia or somewhere else that is more affordable. And I think that's what a lot of Californians have done. You see the in-migration in many other Arizona, Phoenix.
Yep. Even here, there are people moving here from California, and they've sold their $1.5 million, 1.5.
We got a lot of New York in-migration.
But people are selling that, and they come here with $1 million cash looking for properties, and they'll snap them up at just about any price because they feel cheap compared to California and New York.
That's it. So
I've said this a lot lately. There are certainly some factors putting downward pressure on real estate prices. We all know about inflation. We all know interest rates are going up. But the problem is there are more other factors putting upward pressure on real estate prices, namely supply and demand. More people are moving here than we can build houses for. And until supply catches up with demand, economic theory says prices aren't going to go down. So we will see some wavering and maybe some cooling off of appreciation, but I certainly don't see a crash coming anytime soon. Hopefully I don't eat those words.
I think the big risk in any, let's speak to Florida, and then we can kind of compare whenever we get to the point of time where we actually have enough supply to feed the demand that we have here, which is going to be, probably a decade out, right? We're just not building fast enough. But looking back at 2008, really the areas that got hit the hardest, and just happened to be the area we owned a lot of properties, but we owned a lot down Cape Coral. There was this vast amounts of land still in certain parts of Florida. In the Tampa Bay area, a good example is go out to Wesley Chapel, and just if you can pull it up on Google Earth, you can literally see there is still thousands and thousands of acres to grow. And at some point in time, we will get to a point to where we have enough supply or have an oversupply. And right, but those will be the areas that are an hour away from the urban urban central urban area like a Tampa or a St. Pete. Those are the areas that will typically falter first or have issues. But if you're part of either the urban infill market or the immediate area outside that urban infill market, the infrastructure is there, the density is really high, and more than likely you're not going to falter as much as what you will in those expansion areas. So again, that's kind of what I experienced back in 2008 when the crash happened. The pieces of the real estate that got hurt the most that we owned were those that were down in the Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte area again, but that's when they were building tens of thousands of rooftops for, a population that wasn't yet here.
And those have come roaring back.
Yeah, now. Absolutely. It's great. I wish we could have held on, for 15 years, but.
So closing question, what piece of advice would you give the Kevin Bupp of 10 or 20 years ago? And as a corollary to that, what would you tell a newer, inexperienced real estate investor who's listening, as far as, what's one tip, trick, or tool or something that you wish you had known back then that would have helped advance your real estate investing career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I learned fairly quickly, with the single family home stuff. I was managing my own properties and, again, just, buying a property at a time and realized that I hit a brick wall to the point to where, I almost nearly lost my mind, right? It was there was only so much time in a day. And ultimately that was about 25 properties, just running around like a chicken with my head cut off. And it wasn't a really scalable model. And I wasn't looking at the bigger picture of how to create a more efficient business out of owning rental properties. And, the advice I would give is literally hire fast and fire even quicker, but hire that first person, hire an admin. If you're buying a couple rental properties and you're looking to scale this business, be very quick to hire, not necessarily a right-hand man or girl, but hire that individual that's going to take some of the more, admin work off of your plate. And, even as it relates to the property management side, assuming you want to manage your own properties, if you don't, hand it to a group like Jeff's, right? Like find a good, solid third-party management company, but you probably still need that admin to act as the intermediary, to handle the day-to-day crap that comes with owning rental properties, right?
Sure.
Like even if you have a third-party management company, there's still decisions that have to be made. There's still emails that have to be responded to. Hire that person quickly so that you can focus on the more important things, which is, again, this is assuming you want to grow a real estate business. So you can find that next deal. Your time is best spent finding that next opportunity. Networking. As you network, you grow your network, and which ultimately grows your net worth. And you can't do that if you're trying to be one man that does everything inside your business. So again, I learned that lesson fairly quickly, that I need to hire quick and hire smart, though. Hire the right person for the right role, and get them in there as fast as possible.
Yeah, that is great advice. Like try to learn or whittle down or figure out what are your income producing activities or your asset generating activities, and you focus on those and help get help with the other stuff so that you can keep your empire scalable. Great advice. Well, this has been awesome, Kevin. We hit on so many points, but I love the mobile home stuff. I love what you've got going on up there, and I look forward to reading your book. And I thank you so much for being on, and hope to have you on again someday.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff. It's been a lot of fun, my friend.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Morgan Media Real Estate Podcast. As you can imagine, producing this great educational content takes a lot of effort and commitment on our part. We only ask one thing in return. Please subscribe to our podcast using your favorite podcast app or by visiting copelandmorgan.com/podcast. And remember, there's no greater compliment than referring us to a friend or colleague. Until next time, I'm Jeff Copeland.